Begin at the courthouse tonight, where a suspended district court judge was cleared of a second count of road rage. He was found not guilty of the first charge earlier this year.
Yeah, but as our Rudy Trevino reports, Judge Guy Williams' legal problems are not over yet. It is tonight's top story. Visiting Judge Sid
Harley accepting the defense's motion to dismiss the second charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon against Judge Guy Williams. You'll recall Williams was indicted on 2 felony counts of aggravated assault after he pointed a gun at a couple in a car after he was allegedly cut off. Williams was found not guilty of the first count, and the jury was deadlocked on the second.
And so because the jury said that he was not guilty of the first, we had argued that he was not guilty of the second. And so the state agreed, and the judge granted our motion, and so then they had to dismiss the felony.
But the suspended judge's legal troubles aren't over. In May, he was arrested on suspicion of public intoxication and resisting arrest after the car he was riding in as a passenger was involved in an accident.
There's allegations. We don't know. We haven't seen the discovery. We don't know what the information is going to charge him with. So we're just waiting.
So that could still move forward?
That will probably move forward, I suspect.
That case could be brought before a grand jury. In the meantime, Judge Harley imposed bond conditions.
I would like pretrial services to supervise him, not on geographic location, but I do want no alcohol, the firearms provision they're requesting that he not have firearms on his person or in his vehicle.
Williams was allowed to have firearms in his home, and the firearms that were taken from him can now be returned. And because Williams is being investigated by the State Commission on Judicial Conduct for allegations of inappropriate behavior by some fellow judges and court staff, Williams was ordered to make no contact with any of the people who've made the complaints. Rudy Trevino, 3 News.